Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. This time, we're going deep into Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
It's a classic for a reason.
Oh, absolutely. But we're not just going to gush about how much we love Mr. Darcy today. We're going deeper than that, folks.
Yeah, we're gonna X-ray this book and see the heart beating underneath.
Exactly. Austen was a master at social commentary. She hid some serious societal critiques in this seemingly fluffy romance.
Right, like on the surface, it's all balls and marriage proposals.
But underneath,
Underneath, it's about women's struggle for agency in a world that defined them by their marital status.
boom. Austen was dropping truth bombs wrapped in silk and lace. She was so subtle about it, too. Like, you almost don't notice the critique because you're too busy swooning over the romance.
But it's there, and it's brilliant. Take Mrs. Bennet, for example.
Mrs. Bennet. She's like the poster child for societal pressure on women to marry well.
She's obsessed with getting her daughters hitched to rich husbands.
Remember when Mr. Bingley moves to town? She practically has a heart attack from excitement.
I know. She literally bursts into the room and tells Mr. Bennet, "Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, we have had a most delightful evening, a most excellent ball. I wish you had been there. Jane was so admired. Nothing could be like it. Everybody said how well she looked, and Mr. Bingley thought her quite beautiful and danced with her twice."
You can practically see the dollar signs in her eyes.
But there's a reason for her intensity.
Oh, yeah, it's not just about social climbing.
It's about survival.
Right. Remember the entailment on their property?
No sons, so the estate goes to a distant male relative. Her daughters are in a seriously precarious position.
Mrs. Bennet might be a bit much, but you can't help but sympathize with her desperation a little bit. She's playing the hand she was dealt.
Definitely. Austen shows us how societal structures can trap people, and how women especially had to navigate those structures in very limited ways.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Like, how much have things really changed? But let's move on to a character who refused to be trapped. Elizabeth Bennet.
Ah, Lizzie. Now she's a heroine for the ages.
She's so witty and independent, not your typical damsel in distress.
Even George Saintsbury, the literary critic, he was a huge fan of Elizabeth. He praised her intelligence and, her good heart.
She's sharp-tongued, but not mean-spirited.
Exactly. And she can hold her own in any conversation, especially with, a certain proud Mr. Darcy.
Their verbal sparring matches are legendary. But even Elizabeth, with all her smarts, has her blind spots.
Well, she's human, right? Nobody's perfect.
And her biggest blind spot.
Prejudice. She misjudges Darcy based on first impressions and social standing, just like he does with her.
Is that whole don't judge a book by its cover lesson, but amplified by societal expectations and class differences.
Austen was so good at showing how those things can cloud our judgment. Like, we all have those moments where we realize we were totally wrong about someone.
It's like social media on steroids, except without the steroids, because that's bad. But you know what I mean. We form opinions based on snippets of information. It's so easy to get it wrong. Speaking of getting things wrong, let's talk about Mr. Bennet.
Oh, Mr. Bennet. He's a tricky one.
People see him as this detached, ironic observer of his family's craziness.
But is he really?
I mean, his witty comments about Mrs. Bennet are hilarious, but there's a sadness underneath, right?
Totally. George Saintsbury argues that Mr. Bennet's wit is a coping mechanism, a way to deal with his less than ideal marriage and his chaotic household.
Yeah, like he's built this wall of humor to protect himself. But is it really working? Is he truly happy?
That's the question, isn't it? Austen is so brilliant at creating characters that are both funny and deeply human. They're flawed but relatable. We see ourselves in them.
Which is why Pride and Prejudice is still so popular today. It's not just a historical romance. It's a story about real people grappling with real problems.
Problems that are still relevant today. Love, family, societal expectations.
The timeless stuff. But before we get too deep into the philosophical weeds, let's talk about those big themes that are right there in the title. Pride and Prejudice.
They're like the twin pillars of this story.
And they're embodied perfectly in Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship.
Right. His pride comes from his social status and wealth.
And her prejudice comes from her misjudgment of him based on, well, his pride.
It's a vicious cycle.
And it leads to some serious misunderstandings. Like, remember their first proposal scene? Disaster.
He basically insults her while asking for her hand.
I know. He says something like, "In vain have I struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you."
But it's all wrapped up in this judgmental language about her family's lower social standing.
It's like, dude, if you really loved her, you wouldn't care about that. Of course, Elizabeth shuts him down.
Rightfully so.
It's heartbreaking because you can see how much they actually care for each other. But their pride and prejudice are like this giant wall between them.
And it takes a whole lot of self-reflection and growth to break down that wall.
Which is what makes Pride and Prejudice so much more than just a romance. It's a story about personal transformation.
About learning to see past our own biases and the limitations of our social conditioning.
It's a story that has something to teach us all, even centuries later. But you know what else this book has?
What's that?
Life lessons. And not just any life lessons. Enduring life lessons that are still relevant today. Like, seriously, Jane Austen was a life coach in disguise.
I think you're onto something.
So buckle up, everyone. We're about to get schooled by Austen on how to live our best lives.
Okay, so first life lesson from Pride and Prejudice. Ready.
Hit me with it.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Classic.
Yep.
But so true. I mean, Elizabeth's whole thing with Darcy, classic example. She totally misjudged him based on, like, one awkward encounter and some gossip.
And he wasn't exactly Mr. Sunshine at first either.
No, not at all. But Austen shows us how those snap judgments can be so wrong. We all do it, though, right? Like, make assumptions about people before we really know them.
Oh, for sure. It's human nature. But Pride and Prejudice is like a cautionary tale. It's saying, hey, look deeper, you might be surprised.
Totally. And that leads us to lesson number 2. Self-awareness is key. Elizabeth's journey isn't just about realizing she was wrong about Darcy.
It's about recognizing her own flaws, too.
Right. She starts out so confident in her ability to judge character, but then she has to face the fact that she was totally off base.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's a humbling experience for her, but it's also how she grows. And that's the thing
Yeah.
about self-awareness, right? It's not always fun.
Definitely not, but it's necessary for growth. If we can't admit our own mistakes, we're never going to learn from them.
Exactly. Okay, life lesson number 3. Communication is crucial. Like, seriously, so much drama in Pride and Prejudice could have been avoided if people just talked to each other.
Oh my gosh, yes. The gossip, the assumptions, the things left unsaid.
It's like a recipe for disaster.
I know. Think about when Darcy tries to explain himself to Elizabeth about Wickham.
Oh, yeah. And she just shuts him down.
She's not ready to hear it, and then, of course, everything blows up later.
Austen is showing us how important it is to be open and honest with each other.
And to actually listen, like really listen.
Communication's a two-way street, people. Okay, on to lesson number 4. This one's a biggie. Money doesn't buy happiness.
Shocker.
I know, right? But we need reminding sometimes, especially in today's world, where it's all about, like, who has the most stuff and the biggest house and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Austen was way ahead of her time on this one. She shows us that wealth and status don't guarantee happiness.
Pemberley is like the ultimate example. It's this gorgeous estate. Darcy's got it all.
But are the people there truly happy? Not really.
They're all messed up in their own ways, lonely, insecure, chasing after things that don't matter.
Austen reminds us that true happiness comes from within. It's about connection, meaning, purpose.
Preach. Okay, last but not least, life lesson number 5. Love takes time and understanding.
Ah, yes. The slow burn.
Just like Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship.
They don't fall head over heels right away. It's a gradual process. They challenge each other. They learn from each other.
They annoy each other.
Oh, yeah. Plenty of that, too. But through it all, they develop a deep respect and understanding.
And that's what makes their love stories so powerful. It's not just about passion. It's about choosing someone, flaws and all, and being willing to grow together.
It's a beautiful thing.
Totally. So there you have it. 5 life lessons from Pride and Prejudice that are still relevant today.
Jane Austen, the OG life coach. Who knew?
She knew. And now we know too. But hey, we're not done yet. We've got one more part to this deep dive, and it's a good one.
Oh.
We're going to revisit one of the most iconic scenes in the book, Lady Catherine de Bourgh versus Elizabeth Bennet.
Ooh, that's going to be good.
Get ready for some epic shade throwing.
Yeah.
And some serious truth telling. Stay tuned. Okay, so we left off talking about Lady Catherine de Bourgh and her, shall we say, interesting personality.
Oh, yeah. She's a piece of work.
But her confrontation with Elizabeth is like one of the best scenes in the whole book.
It's so intense.
I know. You can practically feel the tension radiating off the page. Like, you've got Lady Catherine, this embodiment of aristocratic snobbery.
All puffed up with her own importance.
And then you've got Elizabeth, who's not about to back down from anyone.
No way. Lizzie's got her own fire.
It's like watching a social volcano erupt. So let's set the scene. Lady Catherine shows up at Longbourn unannounced.
Talk about bad manners.
Right. But she's on a mission. to prevent Darcy from marrying Elizabeth.
She's heard rumors, and she is not having it.
Oh no, this is a scandal of epic proportions, at least in Lady Catherine's mind. So she marches into the Bennet house and basically lays down the law.
She's like, listen up, Elizabeth. You are not good enough for my nephew. End of story.
I know. She actually says to Elizabeth, let me be understood. Your family owes me attention. Sir William's and my relationship and my situation in life must cease on your part, your relationship to me, and connection of familiar intercourse.
As if Elizabeth has any control over that.
The audacity is astounding.
It really is. But you know what's even better?
What's that?
Elizabeth's response. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't crumble. She stands her ground.
She's like, bring it on, Lady Catherine. I'm not afraid of you.
She's so cool and collected. She tells Lady Catherine, you have said quite enough, madam. I perfectly comprehend your feelings and have now only to be ashamed of what my own have been. Forgive me for having taken up so much of your time and accept my best wishes for your health and happiness.
I love that. It's like she's giving Lady Catherine a verbal smackdown while still being totally polite.
It's masterful. Austen is showing us that you can be strong and assertive without being rude.
And that standing up for yourself is always worth it, even when you're facing down someone as intimidating as Lady Catherine de Bourgh. But the best part of this whole scene...
What's that?
Lady Catherine's interference totally backfires.
Oh, yeah, big time.
By trying to control Darcy, she actually pushes him further toward Elizabeth.
It's like she accidentally gave their relationship a turbo boost.
Exactly, because in the end, love always wins, even when it's up against pride, prejudice, and a really bossy aunt.
You said it.
Well, folks, that about wraps up our deep dive into Pride and Prejudice.
It's been a wild ride.
Austen's work is so full of wit and wisdom. I feel like we could talk about this book for days.
Me too. But, you know, even though we've reached the end of this deep dive, the conversation doesn't have to stop here.
Oh, definitely not. We want to hear your thoughts. What are your favorite Pride and Prejudice moments? Did we miss any life lessons? Let us know in the comments. Because let's be real, we all need a little bit of Jane Austen in our lives.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, happy reading.